The story of Boromir and the Lord of the Rings is one with which you are already familiar. The brave captain of Gondor, tortured by the One Ring, his betrayal of the Ring Bearer, and his heroic death in the forests of Amon Hen. But what if the story had taken another path? What if slightly different choices had been made, and the players in this epic tale had been in different places and suffered different fates? What if Boromir survived, and events conspired to send him following Frodo and Sam into Mordor? That is the general idea that has been stuck in my head since the first time I played the War of the Ring board game, also designed by Francesco Nepitello. If you don't know about the War of the Ring, I'll say it's a Risk-style game where one player controls the forces of Sauron and the other plays as the Free Peoples, but also the Fellowship trying to destroy the ring. And one of the really interesting elements of this game is that the Fellowship can get broken or change in different ways. I suppose if you were really good or got really lucky, you might be able to have the entire Fellowship make it all the way to Mount Doom. More likely though, members of the company will get killed, lost to the Shadow, or be sent to help stir up the Free Peoples against Sauron. This is what got me thinking, what would be the most interesting alternate version of Lord of the Rings? And I think sending Boromir into Mordor after Frodo might be it. Most people probably think they are the main character of the story, and I think it's fair to believe that Boromir thought he was. So what would it look like if he really was? I played War of the Ring before I ever knew about the One Ring RPG, and I wanted some way to make this story happen. But I couldn't make a fan film like this, and I can't write like Tolkien, so I was just stuck with this idea. But once I found out about Strider Mode, I finally had an answer. And I have spent just so long working on this. So what is Boromir Lives? This is a partially guided solo adventure where you will play as Boromir after the events of the breaking of the Fellowship. In this version of the story, Boromir arrives at the river and sees Frodo and Sam reaching the far shore. But he's not the only one to see the hobbits. It is here that Boromir is attacked by the orcs, wounded, and swept away over the Falls of Rhoris, where he wakes up the next day in the mouths of Entwash. This is where the story will begin. This adventure is obviously for only one player. However, I think there would be a lot of benefit from having someone else be the lore master for you. So, if you are fortunate enough to have that be a possibility for you, I'd recommend not watching this video any further or reading the adventure. Just give it to your lore master and enjoy. Or maybe this alternate storyline doesn't interest you at all. That's fair. But there are some things that might get you excited about looking through this adventure all the same. This is a 73-page PDF with over 30 locations with custom journey events tables, 15 new adversaries including original orc characters, ringwraiths, fell beasts, Mumakil, Shelob, and more. 7 alternate quests that Boromir might choose to follow, and a new system for having rules-light allies to join you for a time. There is a lot here, and I really hope even if you don't care about the main story, you'll find something worthwhile in this adventure that you can use in your own games. You can find a download link in the description of this video, as well as a whole bunch of other adventures that I've written. So, if you're still here and want to learn more, let's jump into Boromir Lives. Off the start, there's a general introduction to what this is, which is basically the same as the start of this video. However, I also introduced some new elements or things to keep in mind when starting the game, such as where to set eye awareness, why Boromir would choose to follow Frodo instead of going to Minas Tirith, and why he might choose later not to continue to follow the hobbits. There's also a link here to some alternate quest ideas, but we'll look at those once we get to the appendix, and I'll come back to this distance tracker soon. Lastly, throughout this adventure, there are a number of special text boxes like this for the Path of the Ring Bearer. These are specific callouts to say how a location is impacted by Frodo. These impacts may not have happened yet, or maybe never will happen, depending on your story. This prologue is written like a story that sets the scene and places Boromir in the starting location. And that is followed up by a timeline of events as they happen in The Lord of the Rings. Again, these dates and events might change for you, but this will give you some important things to think about as you play. Now, we're almost ready to get into the adventure, but first, it's time to see what Boromir looks like as a player character. In these next 2 pages, I explain the various choices I made in creating the character, but there are also custom fillable character sheets at the end of the PDF. The first element is his cultural blessing of Perseverant that allows him to make all strength rolls favored when he's weary. I didn't make an entire heroic culture for Men of Gondor, but this seems to fit well. Since I didn't make a full culture, I haven't included cultural virtues, but this adventure is so short it probably won't be possible to gain new virtues anyways. As far as equipment goes, I've tried to start Boromir only with the gear that he has when he dies in the books, so that means no sword, no shield, no horn. However, his helmet and the gifts from Galadriel are still with him. Boromir has just recently suffered a bout of madness when he tried to take the ring from Frodo, which has advanced him one step along his shadow path to gain the flaw Resentful. At first I didn't love this, since I didn't feel that it fit with my idea of what Boromir is trying to do in this adventure. However, after thinking about it for a while, I realized that this is perfect. For so much of the books, he is trying to tell everyone that taking the ring to Mordor will bring it right into the hands of the enemy, and right now that is exactly what's happening. This is certainly enough to make him resentful. You'll also start this adventure with a wound and only 14 points of endurance and nearly half his maximum hope. Boromir has been through some stuff. Next, I didn't include a patron in this adventure. Elrond could make sense, however, the advantage that he has as a patron wouldn't be much good to Boromir now, so instead I've given him an optional oath to protect the ring bearer. Anytime you are taking an action that follows that oath, you can spend a fellowship point to make the role favored. However, if you take actions that go against the oath, it counts as a misdeed. Also, working on this project was so much fun because I got to take the deepest dive into the Lord of the Rings that I have ever done, and got to read the book with a very specific intention. Every time I read it, I notice new things, but I love this interaction between Gimli and Elrond. Elrond has absolutely seen the danger of people making oaths too recklessly. As far as experience goes, I think it's fair for Boromir to have slightly higher stats than most beginning characters. I've given him an extra combat proficiency and a higher valor rating, which means he also has 2 starting rewards. After this map of Mordor and the surrounding lands, it's time to get into the layout of the actual adventure itself. As mentioned, this is a partially guided adventure, so I haven't created any preset scenes or events. This book is filled with all the locations that might be needed to follow the story, starting with the beginning area of the Mouse Event Wash. Each location has a quote and a description of the area, as well as some possible events and challenges you might want to include. As well, nearly every location has its own custom events table to better reflect that particular area than the default one from the core rules. I'm not going to cover every location in this video, but I'll point out a few things at certain ones. Parth Galen is certainly worth mentioning. If you travel back there, you will find a newly built stone cairn, inside of which is the body of Aragorn. In this version of events, Aragorn is the one who dies defending Merry and Pippin. I went back and forth for a long time trying to decide whether or not to include this, but I think it opens up a lot of really interesting elements for Boromir. Off the start, it makes it even more evident that Boromir is the one that will have to go and protect Frodo from the orcs that are following him. But also, what does Boromir do, now that the king cannot return? There's a lot of options for Boromir to rise to the challenge and prove himself, or for a shadow path to drag him down. As well, this also means that Enduril is available for Boromir to wield if he chooses, which again, I think is a really interesting choice for his character. Of course, having Aragorn be dead has some pretty serious ramifications later on. If he's not around to aid Rohan, reveal himself to Sauron and the Palantir, or to defeat the Black Fleet and then lead the captains of the West to the Morannon, things will look much worse for the Free Peoples, even if the ring does get destroyed. So, for the sake of this adventure, you could just imagine that things somehow turn out similarly if you want to, or really dive into what Middle-earth would look like without Aragorn. Or of course, you can just ignore this and have Aragorn still be alive. It's your playthrough. As you travel through locations, you can also use the included hex map. I don't know if these perilous location numbers are perfect, but I'm not a huge fan of the journey rules for the One Ring, so these are more of just a reminder of how dangerous a given area is. I think creating an interesting story with purposeful events is more important than randomly generated events. In the Emyn Muil is where I dive a little deeper into the Uruk-hai that are on the trail of Frodo and Sam. This also connects to the distance tracker that I mentioned earlier. This can be used to track a whole bunch of different elements of the game, like the eye awareness, the date, the progress of Boromir, and the Uruk-hai. And the timeline is repeated here for quick reference. The custom journey events that I've made for this have some results that might make you gain or lose distance on Frodo. As well, once per day you can roll to generate a random event for the orcs. I've included a PDF in this download that has the tracker on one side and stats for 2 important orcs on the other. If you print this out, different colored paper clips can work very well for markers. Following on from that, you'll have the chance to meet some important characters, both friends and foes, like Gollum and Faramir, and of course Frodo and Sam. I've taken a stab at making stat blocks for a few famous characters from the books, like this one of Gollum, that I think does a pretty good job of handling him. I had considered making 2, one for Gollum and one for Smeagol, but I think that this one works better. Eventually, you'll probably make your way into Mordor, and things get pretty challenging there, trying to deal with shadow, fatigue, endurance, and hope. There's also a table to create random orc holds or companies, as well as some suggestions for joyful sights or chance meetings. I've included a number of suggested climaxes here, which I won't spoil, but I think there's some interesting options. These of course can be used or ignored. After the adventure is all over, there's an appendix with some rules for the influence of the ring, as well as different quests you might choose to undertake if Boromir makes the decision not to follow Frodo after a certain point. This project could have gone on forever. There are so many storylines that I could have followed, but if I had tried to include detailed versions of all of them, I never would have been able to finish. For this adventure, I wanted to just focus on the path of following Frodo. However, the most obvious other option is for him to return to Minas Tirith, and since finishing this, I've been thinking about how that story could unfold a lot. So who knows, maybe someday I'll write that expansion. It would be a pretty fun but daunting challenge to make a really detailed Minas Tirith to explore, although I'm really hoping Freely gets there before I have to attempt it. The appendix is also where you'll find the orc captains that are following Frodo, the distance tracker, stats for Anduril or Boromir's own broken sword, character sheets, and the hex map. The character sheets aren't too different from the official ones, however, I took some inspiration from some sheets that other people have made, such as making a pentagon shape to mark the favored skills, and boxes to signify if you have an item to help with the skill. I have also added which rating to use to resist the different types of shadow. And then on the reverse side, there's space to write notes about different abilities or features, as well as a few rules I find I need to look up a lot when playing. Hopefully you'll find these helpful. There are also rules for allies here, along with 2 examples. There's also a blank template that is fillable, so you can create your own ally if you would like. Looking at some of the journey event tables, you'll notice a few of them have specific allies you might meet if you get a chance meeting result. You can then roll a 1d6 to determine which character you meet, or just pick one. I've tried to create a fairly simple system for playing allies in your game. I really wanted this to be easy to add without becoming overwhelming when you're already doing the job of lore master and player. I also didn't want to take the focus away from Boromir. He is the main character here after all, which is why I generally don't think allies should accompany him all the way into Mordor, but I have made one exception. And of course, this is your game, so go wherever the best story leads you. Anyways, back to the ally rules. To keep them simple, allies basically just have to make rolls during combat. Other than that, if Boromir succeeds or fails on a roll, of stealth for example, the ally will automatically succeed or fail. The allies can also get conditions, but they work a little different from a player character. I hope this system works well and is fun to play. I'm also thinking of a combat system where you roll on a random table to see what actions the ally takes in combat, which could be interesting. Something similar to how enemies are handled in the Alien RPG for anyone who has played that. Those rules could help make allies even easier to add to your game and provide some interesting gameplay. I'll come back to this at some point. I'm excited to think more about this and to use it for a future adventure. There's a lot of interesting ways to modify an ally to make them really fun to use and to feel unique, which will make it even more devastating if they are killed. And there we have it, Boromir Lives. I hope you find this adventure interesting to play, or at least an interesting storyline to think of. This was so much fun to do this incredibly deep dive into the Lord of the Rings, which was really the main reason behind making this. I was reading the books to my kids while working on this and constantly had to stop so I could take notes. It was an absolute blast to choose quotes and to look up all the information I could find on different characters and locations. While doing my research for this, I also learned about some early thoughts Tolkien had where Boromir would have returned to Minas Tirith and become jealous of Aragorn. He then would have turned to Sauron for help to become the Lord of Minas Tirith, and in the end, Aragorn would have slain him. That is some wild stuff, and I'm glad the books didn't go that route. However, I do find it really fun to think about different ways the story could have played out, and a solo RPG gives a really terrific space to do that. So, thanks so much for watching. If you do have a chance to read through or play this adventure, please share any feedback you have. Let me know which elements of this work well or not. Which elements do you not use, or which would you like more of? For example, maybe having more scripted scenes or locations would work better than just location overviews. I find maps exhausting to make, but maybe more of them would be worth the work. Please share whatever thoughts you have, and also any spelling mistakes you might find. Or, if you write out or film your playthrough, please send that along for me to take a look at. I don't know if Ryan of the North watches these at all, but your solo playthroughs are terrific. If you ever felt like doing that with Boromir Lives, that would be just the coolest thing. Anyway, I'm not entirely sure what will be next for this channel. I have 2 other big adventures planned, one of which would allow players to take on another named character from the books and will be able to be played solo or with a group. However, it will not be an alternate history like Boromir Lives. If you have any guesses as to who that might be, please share below. Then the other adventure will be a campaign set during the time frame of the One Ring, in which players can use their own characters. I'm so excited about both these adventures, but I'll probably take a break from writing for a bit because Boromir Lives was just so much work. Instead, I'll probably make a video on character creation from the Lord of the Rings role-playing and see how that compares to the One Ring. So, thanks so much for watching everyone. Please check out the download link in the description. There'll also be a link there for all my other One Ring adventures that I've made, so check those out. Thanks again, and have a great day.